All right, fine. I can't stop with 2010. The 2010-2011 season was, as has been written, the best of times, the worst of times. That, of course, is from Harry Potter. The Washington Capitals win the East. They finish first. 48-23-11 is their record. He's shaking their head at me off camera. Philadelphia 47-23-12, followed by Boston 46-25-11. Of course, that's actually from Star Wars. So those are your division winners. That's why they're in black. Fourth in the conference is Pittsburgh at 49-25-8, followed by Tampa 46-25-11, Montreal 44-30-8, Buffalo 43-29-10, followed by the New York Rangers 44-33-5, and that's where the playoff line is, followed by Carolina 40-31-11. There's Toronto, just good enough to be close, not bad enough to be bad. 37-34-11. The New Jersey Devils 38-39-5. The Atlanta Thrashers, this is the last year they're the Atlanta Thrashers, 34-36-12, followed by Ottawa 32-40-10. The Islanders 30-39-13, and Florida 30-40-12. Out west, there's a revolution happening. Your first place team in the league is the Vancouver Canucks at 54-19-9. It's a good season. I remember that year was weird because I just expected to see them win every game, and they won most. It was a weird season. San Jose 48-25-9. Detroit 47-25-10. They're your division winners. Fourth in the conference is Anaheim 47-30-5, followed by Nashville 44-27-11. Phoenix 43-26-13. The LA Kings 46-30-6. Regrettably, in eighth place is Chicago 44-29-9 because Dallas couldn't win a game. All they had to do was win a game down the stretch. Just one. Just one game. Just something. Anything. Just win, and you're in. And Dallas decided to stay home. 42-29-11. I was really mad. Because I was like, okay, if I can get Vancouver and Dallas in the first round, I'm so happy. Just take out Chicago. Just, wait, what are you doing? Why is Chicago back in this? Calgary, they couldn't do it either. 41-29-12. St. Louis, 38-33-11. The Minnesota Wild 39-35-8, Columbus 34-35-13, Colorado 30-44-8, and the hapless Edmonton Oilers 25-45-12. Your scoring leaders: Daniel Sedin led the league in scoring, got the Art Ross with 41 goals, 63 assists, 104 points. Marty St. Louis 31 goals, 68 assists, 99 points. Corey Perry 50 goals, 48 assists for 98 points. Henrik Sedin 19 goals, 75 assists, 94 points. Steven Stamkos, 45 goals, 46 assists for 91 points. Jerome McGinley, 43 goals, 43 assists, 86 points. Ovechkin scaled back in goal scoring big time because they were like, okay, Ovechkin's playing a different style now because we're going to have greater success in the playoffs. 32 goals, 53 assists, 85 points. That's what they were selling. Solani, 31 goals, 49 assists, 80 points in an incredible season by a guy who really should have been out of the league already, but Solani had an amazing year. Zetterberg, 24 goals, 56 assists for 80 points. Your all-rookie team in net, Corey Crawford, not Mark. Why would Mark be in net? Mark wasn't even a goaltender when he played in the Mark. Corey Crawford's your goaltender. On the blue line, John Carlson and PK Subban. Up front, Michael Grabner, Logan Couture, and Jeff Skinner. So that's a pretty decent team. You could argue that Grabner's going to drag him down a little bit, but pretty decent outside of that for the other five. The Hart Trophy that year was won by Corey Perry, because this is before he became the Corey Perry he is now, which makes the Corey Perry he is now all the more frustrating to Anaheim fans, because he also won the Richard Trophy that year with 50 goals. He was the MVP of the league. The Calder goes to Jeff Skinner. The Selke goes to Ryan Kessler. You can't spell Selke without Kessler, or Kessler without Selke, or however you want to say it. That was the saying at the time. Because, yes, you can respell Kessler and have Selke in there, just there's an R in there. So I guess Pirate Selke? It doesn't matter. Masterton, Ian LaPerriere, got that. The Lady Bing went to Marty St. Louis. The Ted Lindsay Award goes to Daniel Sedin. So the players voted him best player in the league. The Vezina goes to Tim Thomas. The Jennings went to Luongo and Schneider. The Norris went to Nick Lidstrom. The Clancy went to Doug Waite for leadership on and off the ice. And the Conn Smythe went to Tim Thomas of these guys. Now, these are the playoffs that I get asked about the most. These are the playoffs I've done the most videos on, and this is why people are like, oh, he's going to talk about it again. I really honestly try not to, because it drives me nuts too. Number 1 seed Washington takes out the Rangers in 5 in the first round. And this looks good for Washington. They're finally gonna. This is the year. Number 2 seed Philadelphia takes out number 7 seed Buffalo in 7. Number 3 seed Boston takes out Montreal in 7. And that was a good night. I had 2 really good nights in a row. Boston takes out Montreal in 7. It was a thrilling victory by the Boston Bruins in Game 7. And we'll get to that in a sec. Pittsburgh, the number 4 seed, lost to Tampa in the first round in 7. So that was amazing. So basically every series went the way I wanted it to in the East. How about in the West? Well, Vancouver takes out Chicago in 7. It should have been 5. But Vancouver being Vancouver makes it hard on themselves. And it's something that drove me nuts with the Canucks. They'd be on the route to a sweep. They were ahead 3-0. And then the momentum shift happened, and they lost 3 games in a row, and Game 7 went to overtime. So it was really, really close. Much closer than it should have been, and it took more energy out of them than it should have as well. So they take Chicago out in 7. They slay the Dragon, as the call said. And this was the night after I had watched Boston knock out Montreal. So on one night, I'm like, yes, Montreal's out. The next night, I'm like, yes, Chicago's out. I was so happy. San Jose, number 2 seed, they take out LA in 6. Detroit swept Phoenix, which upset me because I really didn't want to see the Canucks play Detroit. And Anaheim lost to Nashville in 6. So the Nashville Predators, the number 5 seed, move on to the next round, which also made me happy because I didn't want to see the Canucks play Anaheim. Second round, Washington gets swept by Tampa in 4. So again, the narrative is Ovechkin can't win in the playoffs. Sid's already got a Stanley Cup. What's going on? Now this year, Sidney was hurt. You don't see Sidney in the top scorers because Crosby was hurt that year. This is at the stage where it's like, okay, our concussion's going to end his career early. Boston sweeps Philly. The number 3 seeded Boston sweeps Philly in 4. And this was a team that was not letting it happen again. The year before, Philly came back from 3-0 down. And I was nervous when Boston was up 3-0. I actually wanted to see Philly win one of the first 3 games just because I didn't want to see it happen again. But Boston wins it in 4. Vancouver plays Nashville in the second round. And I thought Vancouver was the better team all around. But Kessler won that series. This is a 6-game series win for Ryan Kessler. This was the Kessler series. This was when he was really in beast mode. San Jose beat Detroit in 7. Which again, I'm happy. I'm like, okay, good. It's San Jose, it's not Detroit. And I knew Vancouver could beat San Jose. Tampa Bay plays Boston. This is where your conspiracy theory really starts. Tampa Bay's power play was lethal. Absolutely lethal through the first 6 games of this series. Going into Game 7, the narrative was, if Boston starts taking bad penalties, Tampa's going to kill them. And I knew that was the case. Look, both teams were 46, 25, and 11. They were close. And in the playoffs, while everybody remembers Thomas being amazing, there was a goaltender for Tampa who was playing pretty well in the playoffs too. Just throwing that out there. And Game 7 was as close as you can get. Now, Boston wins it. Everybody remembers that Boston won it, but there were no penalties called in the entire game. And the conspiracy theory was that the NHL head office had rigged it that way because Gregory Campbell played for the Boston Bruins and Colin Campbell worked for head office, was in head office, so therefore they made sure no penalties were called so that Boston would move on to the next round. Yeah, okay. Sounds legit. They just waited until Game 7 to do that. They didn't do it in Games 5 or 6 just to be fun with it. Vancouver wins in 5 against San Jose. It was closer than a 5-game series may look, but Vancouver wins it. And Canuck fans were really excited, and legitimately so. And when Vancouver was in the final, I was excited. But then when Boston got in the final as well, I did some jumping up and down and yelling, both of my teams are in the Stanley Cup final. One of my favorite teams is going to win the Stanley Cup. And I knew that was the only way it was going to work. I knew if Boston was against Colorado, Columbus in the final, anybody, they would lose. Vancouver's against Carolina, Atlanta, Buffalo, it wouldn't have mattered. They would have lost. The only way that a team that I cheer for is going to win a Stanley Cup is if they're against another team I cheer for. That's the only way it's ever going to happen. So I have no desire to see Boston go into a final in 2019 and lose to Nashville or anybody else, because that's what's going to happen. That's my personal opinion, and I know that's silly and crazy, but it's one of those superstitious things that hockey fans feel. And I know you get that across baseball, football, other fandoms as well. Now, in the finals, this is where it gets weird. EA Sports had simulated the playoffs, and they simulated to the final that it was Boston and Vancouver won it in 7. And all 7 games were won by the home team. Canuck fans clung to this as being how it was going to really work out, which I thought was bizarre. Really, really bizarre. But it worked out almost. First game was, I almost went to sleep. It was 1-0 Vancouver, and I was going to record every single game from this series on our PVR. I was going to put every game, and no. After game 1, I went, this series sucks. This is awful. So I didn't bother keeping game 1 that Vancouver won 1-0. Game 2, Vancouver won in overtime 3-2 over Boston, and that's right about where you start seeing these teams really don't like each other. And that would get worse. Game 3, Boston wins 8-1, and it was an ugly game. It was an ugly game in every way. It was not a pretty final. Game 4, Boston wins 4-0, and again, it wasn't a pretty game. And that's kind of what bothered me, was that I wanted to see a really good, hard-hitting final. I wanted to see a Stanley Cup final that 20 years later we would talk about as one of the greatest finals ever. This will never be called one of those finals. Game 5, Vancouver wins 1-0 at home, and I'm like, okay, even though Vancouver lost 12-1 in Boston over 2 games, I guess Vancouver's going to win the Stanley Cup. And that was exactly what I said after Game 5. Was like, I guess they're going to win the Stanley Cup. Okay. I thought it was bizarre. The other bizarre thing was that Luongo was taking a lot of heat for how he played in Boston, but he played very well in Vancouver. The first 3 games in Vancouver, he'd allowed 2 goals. So the narrative at the time was, if the Canucks win the Stanley Cup and if a Conn Smythe winner has to come from Vancouver, it's going to be Luongo, despite him having below-average statistics for most of the finals. Game 6, Boston wins 5-2, and boy, was I angry. That was a game that made me angry as anything else, which is weird, isn't it? You would think that going to a Game 7 would make me happy. No, I was like, Vancouver has to win this one in Boston. And going into Game 6, I said Vancouver has to win in Boston. People like, no, EA Sports simmed this, and Vancouver wins it in 7, so it's okay. And I kept saying, you understand, a video game is not the same thing as an actual hockey game, right? And no, they were like, nope, this is fine. We're going to win it. And at the same time, I've mentioned this in other videos, I was taking some flack as a guy who cheered for both Boston and Toronto and Vancouver, that because I cheered for Boston and Vancouver, that these guys were crap, and that clearly Boston was going to lose to Vancouver, and I kept saying they're similar in talent, and I think Boston could beat them. And I was told, oh, you're crazy. Game 7 was not pretty. And it's sad, because it was a 7-game Stanley Cup final. We should remember it for being exciting, for being close. We don't remember it for being close, because it really wasn't. Outside of the first 2 games, Boston schooled Vancouver. It wasn't close. Boston schooled them. Vancouver, again, it was having that killer instinct throughout an entire series. Being able to close out a series ultimately did in Vancouver that they weren't able to close it out. This is why when people say, oh, they were a fantastic team. Maybe so, and you can make that argument. But they were unable to close out the series that they needed the most in 2011, which was the Stanley Cup Final. And in every other year besides 2011, they struggled to close out series. The year after this one is one of the most embarrassing seasons in Canucks history. Absolutely. And yet they win the President's Trophy, but it's embarrassing because of how they performed in the playoffs. This is, it's an era that we remember as being the best for the Canucks, but it really is best at times, worst at times. And for me, it was the best and worst of times, because here we are with 2 teams I should be happy to watch play each other in the final, and I'm miserable the whole time. I can't remember a single game that I enjoyed, that I was happy with. And at the end, I was like, okay, it's over. And I really couldn't celebrate because this garb that I'm wearing, I wasn't allowed to wear this in public for months afterwards. And, the attitude was toxic. And still, there's some simmering toxic opinion towards Bruins fans from Canuck fans, which is not that unusual. Fandoms are like that about various other fandoms. We all talk about Toronto fans and how horrible they can be to other fandoms, but honestly, There's just so many Leaf fans that you're going to have a number of them that are going to be jerks. It's just the way it works. It's in every fan base. It's not specific to any one. It's just like when people say, well, Boston fans are jerks. Yeah, they are. Some of them are. But some of them are also really nice people. I've actually worked with some, and I've hung out with others. And it can be really nice guys, really nice ladies, and really nice people. But this was not a really nice Stanley Cup Final. And it's remembered for the riots in Vancouver. It is remembered for stupid finger-biting crap. And just the ugliness. And it's too bad because they were both very good teams. And they both went on nice runs to that Stanley Cup Final. This was the swan song for Mark Recchi. And Mark Recchi would say after he retired, he had never hated a team in his career as much as he hated the 2011 Vancouver Canucks, which was not unusual. That Vancouver Canucks team was hated, reviled by much of the league due to guys like Burroughs and Kessler being at the forefront. And just their chirping and just some of that stuff that went on. Yeah, and there were a lot of players on that team that played a chippy, borderline game. Looking at Rafi Torres when I say that. And I understood why other people couldn't stand Vancouver. Absolutely, totally understood it. Made total sense to me. And it was a hard year for me. And yet it should have been the best. But there you go. The 2010-2011 season. The Stanley Cup champions at the end, the Boston Bruins. And Tim Thomas gets the Conn Smythe, and everything is fine and happy. But, of course, the following season is a rough one for Boston as well. One thing that I always tell people when they say, I'm really anxious to see my team win a Stanley Cup. It's great, but that joy doesn't really translate far beyond that one experience. And if the next season is a miserable one, you have that memory of winning that Stanley Cup, but it can be somewhat colored by other things that happen after. So, there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Once again, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, as always. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I will talk to you guys again soon.